Hi, this is International Master Valerie Lilov doing a video for Chesslessons.com. Now let's talk a little bit about the so-called bishop versus knight endgames, and more importantly, this example to begin with. So this is a position in which basically we have very different pawns, and black bishop that's being attacked by the white knight. Everybody knows the major conception that bishops are supposed to be better than knights in an open position. But there comes a trick. When it comes to actually using that, or taking, or basically thinking about it as an actual advantage, there's a problem. It's not very clear how does the knight really, how does the bishop turn into an advantage. So let's see this position and talk about how to plan. Now there are different possibilities that black could choose in here. I mean, apparently the bishop is being attacked, so he's got to remove it. But to remove it, where? Should the bishop go down to the center? Or should he try to move around the queen side so it can make a threat? Do we actually choose to go back, or maybe a little forth? What's the idea? Now, there could be plenty of ideas, and all of them will sound sensible. However, the major goal about these positions is that we always choose or pick up the move that helps the piece to centralize. Therefore, bishop to the e4 makes most sense at the start. Why do you always want to pick up a move that's actually more centralized like that? It's because when you choose a candidate, or when you choose a move that helps your piece to get a little more central, not only that it actually holds a lot more pressure against your opponent just by being where it is, but it's also going to provoke the opponent to make certain weaknesses. Like, for example, imagine that white would actually think about chasing it. Then we're going to attack the other pawn so that, if it advances, eventually it will become a little closer to our king for attacking. See, those kind of things I find very important. See, keep in mind that often also there is no clear way to say you got to do this and this and this and this in an endgame. Like, all endgames are different. So that's why you have to expect that all you need to do is to follow certain guidelines, because through those guidelines you eventually get an idea and you'll know, okay, this is what I can expect and this is what I'm going to think about or do. So this is really important. Basically, the idea is that after bishop to the d5, white can come up with a move of a3. And now, of course, we're ready to go with king e7. It's a perfect move. Point being is that this king actually gets itself there on the d6. And we see the difference between the bishop and the knight. You actually get to feel it in a way. As you get to see, the major problem being is that the bishop, in a way, dominates the knight, simply because white's knight does not have anywhere to go. He doesn't really have the possibility to jump in backward, doesn't have the chance to move forward. It's actually just being a piece that will be fairly easy attacked with king to the d6, and there is a lot more to that too. See, so it's important to think about this. What are the prospects? What about the different possibilities in such kind of position? And so this is the way. What we're doing here is getting the king up. White will, of course, try to do the same. And then black can just play with king to the d6 very quickly. Driving away white's knight seems like the perfect opportunity in this case. And then we also see that in case white plays king f4, black will continue advancing, this time through with a move of b5. And it is excellent. We go with b5. We're ready to reach out for a5 too. You see, this isn't just black advancing and getting ready. It is actually also him ultimately regrouping and getting to follow through. Now, white can't play this because of the challenge. He has to worry. He's got to probably play a move of knight to the d3. And then after the move of knight to the d3, of course, we could go ahead with the move of a5. In case of king to the e3, we could play with the move of bishop to the c4 in this position. We could be pushing up against the d3 knight very effectively. And then we realize the problems. See, the main difficulty for white is that he is going to constantly have to worry about the knight and about the pawns. And it's not that he'll lose because of that, but these things are going to take away the good ideas, the solid opportunities that White would like to use in order to make his game better. And so when he doesn't have that, ultimately he gets both passive, very limited, and restricted in either way. So that's what we're doing. After king to the d4, for example, in this position, the best will be for black to actually consider just an exchange, takes, and king a5. See, it doesn't have to go necessarily like that, but it's likely that if it goes in this type of position, it's just we're actually setting up, getting that king there, ready to advance it. And so what is White gonna do? Well, it's not certain. It's really about White just having a problem, and Black simply advancing and following up. King e3 will be met by the move of b4, which is excellent. And so, for example, after the move of b4, 8x to the b, and then 8x to the b, we see that Black is going to actually use this pawn as a decoy, so that we could force the opponent's king to move out of the defense, and then after he moves out towards the pawn, we're just going to go after the king side pawns and collect them one after the other. King d3, king f4, king c4, king to the g3. That's a perfect idea. And what's great is that White doesn't really have any chance to escape it or move out. So once we get to reach g3, it's basically over. What a lovely example. Now, I'm always saying that, really the point is we need activity, and we really need a pass pawn to move through with. And it's just the whole concept of really playing this way is let's get ready, keep the opponent a bit more backward, and then after bishop takes to the d3, king takes to the d3, king e5, then we just go ahead, we capture, or we get ready to capture the pawn, and then we destroy everything around him. This is really good. So principle is always this: centralize the pieces, keep them advanced, and hold the opponent backward, so that we could actually keep the attack or the advances and make them more dangerous against this position. Alright, now let's see what other version does White have. I mean, perhaps one of the things that he might try is king to the g3. The idea is that in case Black plays with something like bishop to the d5, it's White can make a move a3, and then after the move of pawn up to the b5, eventually White could consider playing a move of f4. That's an idea and something he might want to do. But it doesn't matter, because Black is still going for the passed pawn. He would love to make it. And then, you see, the two key things that happen to be most important in any endgame are the piece activity. We definitely need that. And then, besides the piece activity, it is the passed pawns we could set. Right now, the Black bishop is amazing, but it's really those couple of pawns that is going to advance that are really going to make a big difference in this position. So, b5, a5, White has a problem. He can advance, he can go with king f2, but then Black's going to play b4 and a4. So now we see the pattern. Pattern being, okay, we certainly want these advanced pieces to stay forward, to really keep up our attack. And now what White happens to do is knight d3, but then there could be the move of pawn to the a4. And surely, I mean, if White goes back with his knight on the c1, we could take the knight with a2, or we could even improve the king and wait for a little bit until that a2 opportunity really arises. King to e3, g4, a2, knight takes a2, bishop takes a2. We get that knight down. We have our king moving forward in this position, so it can help. And it's just so beautiful. It's really, really good to see it. I love this example, and especially the idea of centralizing the bishop and getting the pawns to move. It means a lot when you're playing in similar positions. Now I want to show you another kind of a bishop versus knight endgame that matters a lot, because it's when it comes down to bishop and knight endgames, people don't quite realize that there are certain details that would basically determine if you could win or not. So what are those details, and how do they play off? Let's take a look at this position, which happened in the game between George Meyer and Tigran Petrosian in their game in Khanty-Mansiysk 2009. In today's game, we're going to see these two grandmasters really playing a position that seems winning for white, and yet black can still make fight of it as long as he tries to keep material on the board. And we're going to see a couple patterns taking place that are big. First of all, what black did was g5. He didn't want to take the e4 because that would have allowed white's rook to come in or create a like a target. So black plays with the move of pawn to the g5. Now what goes next? After the move g5, as it was, then ultimately white continues with bishop e3. See, the bishop does not need far advanced positions. The bishop is just supposed to be in a good place, possibly a good diagonal, and what we want to do is to have it around. So like we could see with the move of bishop e3 is that white's got a great looking square spot, can challenge, can do a lot of things. Now black obviously has a little bit of a problem here. He played rook takes to the e4, rook takes to e4, f takes to the e4, and then white plays bishop takes to the a7 in this moment. King to the g7, and then bishop to the d4 check. King to the g6, and king e2. And what's quite interesting about this is not only the fact that white managed to get his bishop centralized, very much like in the previous position, making it super great, but also the fact that after his king comes to e2 and he goes through the e3 square, he ties down on d-thans black's own king, making it terribly passive. And we've got also all other things that will make him bad. The knight on f7 that has basically nowhere to go, the weakness in the e4 that's being targeted, and the majority of black's own pieces that are being awful. All those factors, really in white's ability to keep his advantage. With the move king e3, we're doing it perfectly, and black is just bad. So black played knight h6 in this position, and white plays h3, g4, and now there is the special a4. If you really think about the difference between white's and black's pieces, now you're going to very quickly realize it has all to do with the pieces. White has incredible pieces and a lot of strength with each of them, and black's got passive ones with nothing that they can make. Each of those just really sets up for the idea that black can't do anything. No matter where he goes or whatever he tries to do, his own immobility practically makes it so great for white. With a4 on the line, apparently black has to do g takes h3, but then white can do g takes h3. And then, surely, that's a problem because black can't do a move of knight to the knight g4 no more. Now knight g8 and b4. See, the same pattern works over again. It is about the piece activity, and it is about the passed pawns, the way they can stand and the way they can do things. Trouble is that black really has a problem with his own, pieces, and white's got a tremendous potential by simply advancing his own. It's great. Really, it is. So what happens next? Seeing the activity go flourish for white, what does black try? Well, black tried to make the move of knight e7, and then white does bishop c5, knight d5, king d4, knight to the f4, pawn up to the b5, and then in case of king e6, there was a5, king to d7, knight takes to the e4, king takes d4, knight takes h3, f4, h5, king f3, and then black resigned. It's amazing, he lost his game just because of that fact that white had so much more potential, so much more activity all the way through. It was never possible for black to really make anything else, and after king f3, it's understandable why he lost it. It was great. So this is one of the great examples of, in simple actually examples, of dominating or the knight versus with a bishop versus a knight. So it's kind of interesting to see this and realize the danger, the difference that it poses. So let's talk about a couple other examples so we could see how they work. This is an example that we got to look from the black side, and I think it's a terrific example. Black has a bishop versus knight, and what you realize is that, as it stands, it's a great position. So what black needs to do is to find a way to, use his pieces, keep black a little behind. So what to do, or how to play it now? It's a pretty huge question. The first, query that we got to ask ourselves is, okay, so obviously black's much better. There's no doubt about that. But what is the first thing that you need to do? If you find yourself in a position like that, what is the very first idea that you take up on, and then you really get better? The best thing that black really wanted was to improve or start with his king. Start with the worst placed piece. Or start with the strongest piece that just doesn't feel like it has the potential to get it better. And once you start with that, it changes everything. That king is now ready to go towards the e7 to the d6. And now we're going to dominate the knight. King f1, king e7, king e2, king d6, king d3, king d5, h4. And now, okay, the king is already in place. It's already perfect. So it's time for us to get that bishop around. Bishop c8 was a wonderful move. The bishop slides through the a6. King goes down to c3, and then black played even h6. And it's a really lovely position for a number of reasons. Most important reason being is that with that strong-looking king on the d5, with the beautiful bishop out there, and with the possibility for us to limit white's knight and the remainder of his pieces, we're really setting up for a great position. Is there more to that? Sure. But we just want to make sure everything is working now. Just at the moment, at least, it feels perfect. We've got space, and we've got the chance to attack. Maybe we can even play it king to the e4 in a short run. That's quite good. That's how it works. So what does black do? I mean, after the move h6, he certainly did not like that. He played knight d4, running out for the f5 square, so he can jump out. And then there's g6, of course. Knight c2, king e4. All that black ever wanted was basically a possibility to make his pieces more active. And that's how you dominate. You're not by knowing necessarily what those pieces are going to do or making sure that they're brilliant. That's likely not going to happen out there. And see, so this is very, very important. After continuing with this, then after that, basically we have that king ready there. We've got the possibility to set up, and just everything is great. See, I love this position. It's wonderful, solid, and it's really relevant exactly in this position. So like, white cannot play f3 due to king f4 and king to the g3. Our bishop still stands on an incredible position, and white's just progressively going down. He played knight e3, and then there was f5, king d2, and f4, knight g4, and h5. See, it's kind of amazing how fast this really works in black's favor. King f5, knight d7, and then of course we've got a move like bishop to the c8 that we could play. Bishop to the c8, knight f5, and then there's g5. What I have to say is that this is really strong, not just in terms of black, running forward and basically advancing his pawns and pieces. It's just the way on how every single piece sets itself forward to attack. Black is doing it perfectly. And now he's creating what I call as an imbalance. You could hardly win an endgame unless you could actually, create an imbalance inside the opponent's position. And you see, that's what we're doing in this moment. We've got the chance to, we got a chance to go forward. And let's take a look after the move of pawn up to the g5. Apparently, white's got an extra problem. He played g3, g takes h, g takes h, king g4 matters. White plays knight at the g6 in this position. And then after continuing with the move of, after that type of a move, then we're setting up everything. We got the attack, we've got the activity, and it's good. So white played with the move of knight at the g6. So a knight g6, bishop f5, knight e7, bishop e6, pawn to b4, king takes h4. See, once an imbalance is created, actually, we get so this is very important. It's like we created the big weakness. We're reaching it for with the king, and then we have also chance to move back and keep pushing. So white lost it. Was there a way for white to defend better? Of course, there's always a way to go better, but there wasn't much of a chance for him to do that, because you realize that the whole thing is that black's really strong. He could have even played with a move of king to the d4. Black could have done that type of move. And so we could see that because the knight has no place where to go, in case he plays directly with a move of knight to the h7, bishop f1, g3, f takes to the g, and then after f takes to the g, of course we could go ahead with a move of bishop to the h3, knight g5, bishop to g4. So you get to see basically the idea of it's really perfect. We have the wonderful idea. We have the limitation against white, and that's great. So this is quite amazing. And actually, again, even though there is no big weakness or direct type of target out there, due to the domination of the bishop and the king, White's knight still can't do anything except to run down towards the f7. And once it goes to the f7 square, we play a6. I find these moves really nice. Not because they are useful and restrictive. They use the power of the pawn to really limit our opponent. But the whole thing is that after a5, in case white plays with knight to the d8, we could play bishop to the d7, and then we could, it's a great thinking. It's a really good idea, especially once he's cut off and he doesn't have that possibility to follow. All right. Well, actually, this is great. If he plays king f7, then maybe a bishop to the e6. Knight d6, bishop takes b3. We're almost easily winning that pawn, getting a pass pawn, and that king is dominating white's, so this is great. And this is how you want to do it. Very valuable, very powerfully played, and very important all the same as it goes. So these are just some of my major thoughts and ideas on what you have to keep in mind in order to become more successful, and that's just keep that in mind whenever thinking. Where do I get to bring my pieces? How do I put myself there? And the different challenges. It was very beautifully done by Black. All right, now let's take a look and see another example of a bishop versus knight. This time we're going to see it from White's side, and obviously White's got this really good-looking position. Space is there. Black's a bit limited, and I have to say this is a wonderful structure. Question is, it's where should White go now? Does he push up to attack? Does he do anything else? So this is very, very important. And what's the best way to go? See, the very first thing that you need to do in this type of position is to concentrate on regrouping. Now, what do I mean by regrouping? Regrouping is the best way to go for it. I mean, the best idea to go forward with the regrouping is to take a certain piece and then maneuver it to the place where it's just going to be much more powerful and relevant. That's how we're going to do it. What's White's best way to do it? Well, after the move of after black's last move, knight c7, white decided we should regroup. See, the idea of regrouping is very simple. We take a piece that is kind of good, or maybe it is already very good, and what we want to do is to just move it onto a place where it's going to be a lot more efficient. So besides sitting on the g4, which is a good diagonal, white wants to possibly place it on the c4, and ultimately the idea is that we just take away black's opportunities. He doesn't have now the way to play with knight to the e6, because we can take it and even get to promote that pawn by pushing it on the a. And there's other stuff too that white is actually pretty ready to set out. Most important idea about these positions is always this: regroup the pieces. Black plays king e6, white does bishop c4 check, forces the black king to move, and now we see that in case he goes down to the f6, white's likely just going to, I mean, you could just wait for a couple moves really, and then make a couple, like bishop 8 d3, king e6, bishop e2, like a little triangle with the bishop, as I call it. And then when we get to this point, we see that black's king has no way to keep the e5 square or f5. So he's got to move. Then we set up the king on the e5 spot. It's moving. So the king and the bishop simply dominate the knight, which feels really very passive and everything. So this is really, really important. And we can have that idea of playing the move king to the d6. We can have the opportunity to advance, like very effectively against black. So if he moves down, we can just play king to c6, and then we have the a6. We've got the, just the bishop f7 maybe played too very quickly. It's really great, beautiful and great. Now what about black? You see, so this is. I think it was a great position. I really love the way now white plays it. Black couldn't do a thing. Why? Because he was unable to just make anything. None of those pieces that black was having earlier in the previous positions were in any good condition to make themselves forward or to make themselves better. So that's how white got it. That's how he was able to achieve a fantastic formation with a lot of ideas. An interesting point about these ideas is that regrouping usually takes 1 or 2 moves. So it's not even going to be that slow. Just want to do it right. Here's what happened in the game. Black played king d6, knight king f5, knight d5, king g6. Of course, white is reaching out for the g6 so that he can attack the h6 and do it right. And given that, I mean, apparently black is in a deep trouble already. So after the move of king to the g6 as it happened, knight e3, and then we play bishop to the e2. c4, king takes h6. c3, bishop to the g3. And now we see that even when black advances that pawn and turns it into a faster passer, doesn't matter, because of the king g6, knight d4, and then king f6. Basically, after black plays knight e6, we can do a6 and we can tie him down. So now he cannot defend both pawns. That's the problem. A bishop could possibly defend a couple of pawns that are advancing, but a knight can't, because it can be in both places at the same time. It's a very fabulous idea of really turning this into a direct threat. h6, a7, and just actually that is the way to go for it. With this move, apparently we're realizing the main problem. Like after a6, h6, and a7 are coming, so black really can't play c2. But then if he doesn't get to play with c2, if he plays knight g4, king g5 here, we got bishop c2 and a6, which could easily win. White's getting in the super strong pawn. c2 just can't move that for obvious reasons, and game is obviously, it's quite great, so no chance for black to escape. What a lovely example that is, I think. And it really illustrates that key concept that passed pawns can do almost anything as long as you back them up, as long as you support them with those pieces. And so this is very, very important. Okay, so like that's the fine idea. Like really a big idea when it comes to setting your pieces together and getting them close by, so that they can advance and they can keep up. Now let's discuss another type of example that is really interesting. Now this is in a game play between Goldberg and Tolish. It's white to play. Now again, we see a position with a bishop versus knight, pretty dominated by white. But it's really that major question. Okay, so what do we do? Do we break through? Do we open up? Do we attack? How to play it? Very interesting. See, the most important thing about this is that, white is definitely sitting well. He's got that bishop on h7. He's got those pawns and all sorts of activity. But what you really need to be thinking about, what we really must do, is decide. Advance the pawn, go forward, or actually think a little bit more about the possibility to, push our pieces forward. So, like, what's the best way to go? Well, it's h4. Great move, which really situates the pawn so it can move up. And then eventually, once we have that, we're going to tie him down. We're just going to get this knight, because his knight is actually not doing all too well. So yes, perfect. Always start with a kind of move that is really going to help you by limiting the opponent. h4. And black played g takes h, g takes h, knight e5, and then there was bishop to the f5, knight f3, king f2. It's great. Knight takes to the h4, bishop e4, king c7, king g3, knight g6, bishop takes gf, takes g f7. So what is so interesting about this is just how literally with the idea of a pass pawn rolling forward and the bishop just being more flexible than black's knight, white makes it super successful in literally no time. This is how you should do it. The idea of setting up a pass pawn is huge, and you have to do that the faster you can. You see, usually you do that with 2 pawns versus 1 when you exchange one of them, and the only one that's remaining, the opponent can't hold it with another one of his pawns. That was a clear example right now in that case. And there is more, obviously, a lot more ways, but that's perfect. It's a great possibility, interesting way, and a big idea on how to think this through and make sure that everything works. Let's see another super interesting example. Let's take a look at this slow game. It was actually played. Very instructive, very interesting, and it was played between 2 greats. So, let's take a look. d4, g6, e4, bishop, g7. Botvinnik was playing the normal e4, d4 line, and basically black played the modern. c4 was met by d6, and so this is really interesting. After the d6, knight to the c3, and then knight f6. Okay, so what is going on right now? Well, basically the idea is that white is simply developing around, and black obviously has the idea as the goal to put his pieces as close as possible and possibly challenge the center. So what's happening right now? After the move of knight f6, white played with the move of pawn to the f3, and then after f3, black did knight b to the d7, and then after knight b d7, of course, this is the moment where white is actually playing for bishop to the e3 in order to just finish up with the development and focus on playing knight with bishop to d3, with knight e2 short castles, or queen d2 long side castle. So now what black plays is e5. Of course, his intention is let's counter the center, and let's do this fast so that white doesn't get a whole lot of time. Surely white played knight ge2, and then there is the move of knight to the h5. Perfect. This move is great because it sets black up for the idea of actually realizing not just knight f4, but also a pretty solid pressure against the white d4 pawn. And in fact, actually after that type of a position, and it's just white played d6 to the e, then black played with d6 to the e, and so next white actually castled on the short side area. This is very important. Now what's happening after that? After the short castles, black played with a move of c6, and so with the c6 in mind, we're preventing the opponent from actually getting to the d5, and so black started it really well. Tal is known as a very strong attacking player, but it's exciting to see how he's actually playing it like this, because we've got the space, we've got this setup, and then we're really cutting off any resources that white may be having around the middle or through other sides of the board. So it's very simple, very smart, and really good as it goes. So what's actually going to happen on the next move? After that, after the move of pawn to the c5, then of course c6, white played queen d2, queen to the e7 in this type of position. And so after queen d7, rook a d1, and then there's knight c5 in this position. Of the space, we've got the chance to attack the d3, and you can see how white's development turns out rather inefficient. It's not that it's bad, but ultimately we're also going to follow what moves like a rook to the d8, actually. So after the move of knight c5, white plays with the move of bishop to the b1. So what's going on next? Well, basically after continuing with this move, now black is playing with the move of knight to the e6, and then what we realize is that when white plays back there, then we can of course play bishop to the f6, and it's good. So step by step, black is really setting up to simply improve and gather his pieces strong. So it's good. Let's see what happens next. The very next move, white plays king to h1. Surely that's the idea, just let's escape. And upon that move, what black actually decided to do was knight h to f4. Strong. See, this is probably more related to the middle game part, but I really want to say that it was a very valuable kind of opportunity for black. Just really getting the chance to transfer those pieces and setting them up against the opponent. That was very helpful. So what's actually going to plan? What's going to happen next move? Well, as a matter of fact, after that directly it was played. Then there was g3 that white continued. So pawn up to the g3, and so in this case, black played with knight x to the e4, and knight x to the e2, queen takes knight x to the e2, and then pawn up to the h5. Very good. You could realize now that it's a big idea. All that black really wants in a position like that is to make sure he could really take these pieces and slowly bring them into the play, little by little. That's all we want, and it makes a lot of great sense. Step by step. What happens now in that specific position is that after it was done, apparently white has to do queen to the f2, and then after the move queen to the queen here, we'll also get to see that black can play the move pawn up to the b6. So step by step, very, very good idea. Then after that, of course, white plays with the move pawn up to the f4. And then in case of the move f4, surely we were able to progress with a simple e takes f, g takes f, and then bishop to the b7. That was a perfect candidate move. Now we're actually able to press on, maybe through a move like pawn up to the c5. And yes, what does that have to do with the endgame? Now, what is so interesting about this is the way on how this turns into an endgame and what really happens afterwards. That, I believe, is the most important part. So after that move, then what we could see is that white played with the move of pawn to the e5, and in this case, then there is the move of rook to the d5 in this type of position. So what you can consider in this case is playing with bishop g7 here and then knight c7. Of course, we don't take that rook to give him the two strong pawns out there, and that's great. Knight c3, knight takes d5, pawn takes d, rook d8, bishop e4. He's really having these three pieces that are perfectly well set, situated, and advanced. And now black's goal becomes very clear. We will not be able to achieve basically anything unless we find the chance or unless we get an opportunity to either limit or restrict white or keep him a little more backward. That's a great idea. So what does black get to do now? Well, we play bishop to the a8, and then actually after that type of a move, after we continue with the move of bishop to the a8, then we have everything. We have the chance to keep the tension against the d5. We have the possibility to keep everything in line, and so we have this great resource. So bishop a6, a8, queen g3, b5. The middle game really transforms very quickly. The complicated middle game that black actually wanted to simplify transforms very quickly in a rather interesting endgame. There's lots of complications. Of course, white is trying to run away from the possible exchange because he doesn't want to. He wants to keep the queens and hold on to the attack. And that's, of course, giving black a great option, because then if white obviously doesn't do this, then black is ready to challenge and counter himself. Bishop e4, rook ce8, that came through. It was great. Step by step, just those pieces really turn into a fantastic position. Bishop f3, queen takes to the f4, knight e2, queen to the h4. And then after bishop to the f2 was done, surely, of course, black plays queen g5 and rook to the d8. And then, of course, there's the queen and e5 move, which was terrific. Strong place for the queen, a big idea, that we could advance with, and so it's like, really, it works. Then, of course, white played with the move rook to the d1, hoping to protect and cover everything, and he almost did. The idea is that black played with the move of rook g4, and that was a great idea, great candidate. All that was done was in order to actually guarantee the power of this rook transforming itself into an incredible attacker versus white's position. It now has the ability to attack b4, and we're also like sort of letting it go, but with the idea alone to attack against the d5, take it down, and keep white backward. It was great. What about white? Well, there was not a whole lot that he could do, really. It's just white is backward, his pieces are increasingly passive, and it was just bad. So he couldn't do it. Let's see what happens next move. On the very next move, well, white certainly did not feel very comfortable about this position, and he decided that maybe it's a good moment to actually plan up and continue with a3. See, white was trying literally everything so that he could consolidate, and it was decent. It was very good. What comes next is bishop b7. See, until the end game happens, there is a lot of play, a lot of preparation and everything. You have to understand that endgame is a very small part of the game itself. Before that, it's usually preparation and development and setup and all those things until we really get to the point where the attacks and everything else starts happening. And so black knew that very well. He puts the rook on the d7 and readily keeping the pawn on d5 under pressure. We understand now that white is having a problem, not just with the pawn but also with the rest of his pieces, and it's like bishop e3. He returns backward and hope to look for this, and then black plays with rook to h4 here, and then rook to the c4. d5 is under attack right now. White's pieces just don't feel like they're doing anything. He moved back in order to solidify, but then black just plays rook to the g7, and you could see what this whole thing leads to. An enormous pressure, as white has already lost much of his control, because white is left with no real tactics. He had to do queen to the d2, which black responded with h4, moving through, setting it up, in a position to attack with. So then white plays h3, queen to b2, and now we get the exchange. What you need to know about exchanges like that, and especially a position of bishops versus knights, is that the bishops are always going to dominate the knights. However, it is truly important, and if not to say very, very necessary, that in these positions we take the time to build. And I mean it seriously. You want to take the time and really just get whatever you have to in terms of challenge, tension. So after bishop c5, rook d7, we realize the white's knight is completely unable to help. Can't come in time anytime soon. It is fairly backward, if not to say unable to move in, and that gives black a chance to feel extremely successful. With the pressure that's created against the d5, we're really not letting white to come out anywhere else with his pieces. And then after rook takes to the c1, bishop takes to the c, surely there's bishop g5, we got d5, when we have the other points under pressure. It was really well done, and it's really interesting. That's how you do it, step by step, taking the space, getting to control things, and effectively advancing against the opponent. Well, after that, white played king to the g1 in order to obviously just run out, and he tried that. Yes, that was nice. But it doesn't matter, because like after we continue with this, bishop takes to the d5 is played, and then we're good. It was an excellent position, a wonderful setup, and with that in mind, we're perfect. See, most chess players are going to think about endgames like, okay, I've got to apply a lot of mastery. And while you certainly do, you have to understand that in most of these games that you get to, the mastery has already been in that side of the game, in that point where we're actually building to this. So that means literally it's already over. How you play the end game is also very important, and I always say it's important. I always say it's valuable, but you have to understand it. The most relevant part is before the end game really happens, and before the end game happens, before it really appears, that's where everything is supposed to go for. And it's a big deal. And so actually after that, bishop takes d9, e5 captures take here. Then apparently white is in a lot of trouble. He is not able to do anything good. He has an issue, you name it, with what kind of things. They're horrible ideas. So, what's coming up next? This knight c7, c5, bishop to the c8. Didn't matter really, because the truth is that as soon as we have that, the a6 is being very well protected, and yes, we're cool. Everything is perfectly well secured, defended, and well situated. So it's very, very good to play. What about white? The knight is strong, but you see, never think about pieces in terms of how they look. I like the idea of how a certain piece could look. It is, however, much more about thinking on what a piece is going to do. You see, because what the piece is actually going to do is what determines its value and opportunities. And the problem right now is that white's pieces really cannot do all that much. I mean, they're around and they seem good, but it doesn't mean anything, in this particular case. What we care about is the space, the activity, and everything with it. So, king f2 was met by king h7. The power of the passed pawn really is that it will hold the opponent's position. So after king h7, what we're actually seeing is that after that, white plays a4, b takes to a4, knight takes to a, and then there is bishop f4, h3, and so actually then we have h2. What was great is that black dominated white because of the nature of the pieces. So it's really, really interesting in this case. The nature of black's pieces and the bishops is just what helps him to dominate. So, king h7, a4, b takes a4, knight takes a, bishop f4. Then there's this idea. Obviously, white has already won material, lost some material, and you see. So actually, this is great. So this is really, really very interesting. Limiting the opponent and having him backsided in this type of position is, pretty horrible. So that's how we're winning it in this case. So for instance, then here, here, king to the b1, and so that's very interesting. Well, actually, let's take a look and see. Then after that, king e6, knight to the d2, then bishop to the g2. See, in fact, after that type of position, then of course king takes the a. Now we're just dominating the opponent, and so this is really good. Step by step, we're actually limiting, cutting off the opponent, preventing him from being able to reach anything. So then, of course, the few bishops, the king, the challenge, it's all great. What I find exciting about this whole game and the way it worked was that black was really all about, it was all about black's ability to develop and strengthen, make those forces of his perfect, and just it's really, really good thinking. And then ultimately what we realize in this position is first and foremost, number one, we need to make sure that the end game is more successful, that the end game is more relevant, it's more significant, and it helps little by little, and so that's how we do it. Very interesting type of idea, great examples, and tactics are awesome. Knight c3, knight takes d5, rook d8, and I really like that game because it kind of sets up the possibility for advancing and attacking, and really kept white backward for the most part because he wasn't able to do anything, and this is great. It's very interesting and efficient to keep in mind. Let's take a look at another. In this next game that was played between Boysiuk and Chichoki, this was actually played between Poland and between two masters in Poland 1990s. So it's very interesting to talk about this game. So what should black do right now? So, first and foremost, what we must be doing is remember to expand. So that's what you would like to do. So just, black's got two bishops, he's got a fantastic king out there, and he's got really relevant space. All of that is great. So, it's just very, very good to have a position of this kind. But then, how do we use it? What to do when you're already having it? Well, see, after you get those, what I'd call piece activity, because it's really important to have that, then what you want to do is to concentrate your attention of, actually giving yourself immediately much more space. So this is a really, really powerful in that case. And so, for example, after continuing with the h4, it worked out perfect. We do have that idea, and so essentially, in case we continue with the move of so like king takes h2, we're going to have even a move of bishop to the g4, and that's a perfect idea. We've got that move. We can think about the move of bishop to the d8 in that moment, and it's great. It's really, really interesting to see this, and it's also great to realize that the value of this position, especially after bishop to the g4, is so big. Like, literally there is nothing that white can do, given the problems and the possibilities and everything. See, it was great. See, so this is perfect. Step by step, what we're actually seeing in here is the idea of So bishop g4 cuts off the possibility to of the white king to run away. And then, of course, we've got the bishop to the d8, so that basically the king has practically no place, no opportunity to run. It's a very interesting way to see how we're limiting him. I love ideas of this kind in this type of position. So we have that opportunity to follow up. So the king is cut off. He's got no place where to go. And most importantly, in such a position, we're really, limiting him. It's a powerful idea. It's really relevant. And then apparently white is backsided with his king unable to move. Restrict, limit, and taking away the opponent's possibilities is all we care to do. And when we do that, we're actually just going to really restrain the opponent's position and have him backsided for everything. It was a good idea, and let's take a look and see. So we cut off the king. Let's take a look at another example. I want to show you another way on how we could think about bishops and games. Let's talk about this. Kramnik versus Luthier. Really interesting game. Kramnik was white, and he's got a positional advantage due to his protected pass pawn and his, solid position. So the question is, where do we go from here? So, what should white do next? If you look at this, you realize that the strong connected pass pawn is a perfect possibility for advantage. I love things like that. But then, of course, there comes this very valuable question, which is, okay, we've got a strong passed pawn, we've got wonderful pieces, and everything looks great. But how do we get to use this? Well, I always say, think of advancing. Because, just really advancing your pieces is what's going to make a total difference in the game. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter what endgames you're actually playing. It's not going to work. Bishop e4, and it's very important. Now basically what we're having is the strong position for the bishop, with the possibility to expand. We can get ready, and then of course sure we have the chance to set up the attack against h7. We can have king to the e3. We've got the chance to keep up. Most importantly, we have to start with the gradual moves, the moves that give us a simple activity. Don't worry about it. Nothing else matters. Just let's make sure we have that chance of making our pieces get strong, move into better positions, and later it's going to become clear what we do. So what's happening next? After that one last move, basically, white played in the game. He's not feeling too good. He played h6, bishop e3, and then take a look. I mean, if you really think about this position, the only thing a black had to do was king to the d7, king e1, and bishop c6. But now white does not exchange. He doesn't want to. See, his goal, white's major primary goal in this position, is to keep as much as possible this position without changing, without shifting through, and let the opponent really force it. Because then if we let him to force the position, if we allow ourselves to just stand stronger, ultimately after bishop d3, bishop d5, a3, king to the d2 exchange, king c3, bishop c4, and then bishop a6, king to the d4, a4, check, and bishop d7. Things are good. So ultimately, it is a very powerful square for that bishop. We have him a little bit more backward, and we have him away. This is how you do it. Step by step. Slowly and effectively turns out that white's restricting. It's perfect. Then black did, of course, the move of bishop to the d5. And so as a matter of fact, what we're seeing is, obviously black's got, bad pieces. It's got a terrible position of everything. And then in the end of the day, after white plays king c3, bishop a2, there's h4. What is so critical about these moves, basically, is that white is awful. So this is really interesting. Little by little, of course, black plays with the move bishop to the d5. And then, actually, after bishop to the d5, bishop c1, bishop a2. This here, and of course, bishop e8. The pawn goes in the d7, add there. So now the pawns are going. Black is limited. He doesn't have a way to transfer his pieces. He plays bishop c6 and bishop f8. See, once again, we're really hitting the same beat, but just in a different way. And then most importantly, you realize that the activity of white's pieces, it really extends over black. It cuts him off, prevents him from being able to actually, do anything special. And see, this is a very valuable idea, very interesting thinking, and it's just really good. Black is already in a horrible position. He played bishop takes a4, bishop takes g7, taking. Of course, we got the h passed pawn. We keep it up, and of course, this is easily winning. So white's it's great. The activity of the pieces determines everything that we have, and that's how you take advantage. Hope this makes sense.